The Madman! Welcome to the top cards of the week. I'm still working out exactly how to rate these cards, if they even should be rated at all. This time around, I've decided to do just one condensed star system for design and balance together. Let's get started with Seer. 5 mana, 0/7. Death Rattle, destroy all minions, add their attack and health to your Cthulhu wherever it is. So it does combo with a card like Dark Pact. So that's for 6 mana, you can destroy all minions. Now, the add to their attack and health to your Cthulhu part is ridiculously overpowered. I'll just go ahead and say that right out. That's just a really easy 2-card combo to give your Cthulhu. Gee, I don't know. Against certain decks, it could be like 20.
You will die.
First of all, I'll just establish that Blizzard would never print a card that were to deal with Cthulhu. Second of all, I would establish that I think it's horrifically overpowered with the Cthulhu thing in Wild. Without, I think it could be a reasonable card. It is a card that only combos when you actually kill off your own minion. That's like a 2-card combo, like Equality Consecration. So I'm gonna rate this card 2 stars. It would never see print with the word Cthulhu on it. But I think if you remove the line about the Cthulhu, I think that card's a reasonable card. Next up, we've got a clever little card called Mountain Dew. Given how much Blizzard likes pun names, makes sense. 12 mana, restore 16 health, costs 1 less for each other card in your hand. So uncastable, if you have not that many cards in your hand, of course. To get it to be competitive with Greater Healing Potion, which is just 4 less healing for Priest, you need 8 other cards in your hand, which is pretty tough. Given that Ferocious Howl is already in there, and that's better armor versus health, I think the card is just too weak. So the interesting question then is, could you consider restoring 30 health? Or would that be overpowered? Somewhere in between 16 and 30, I think, is the right place for the card to be. When I actually think about it now, though, I'm imagining that turn after Ultimate Infestation, and then you just play Mountain Dew, like late game, and then you've just super reestablished yourself. Maybe it is too good already. Maybe you don't need to make it even 20. I'm just gonna go ahead and give this card 5 stars. I think it's pretty well balanced. My instinct first was too weak, but after thinking about it, it's like, yeah, okay, sure. Hugsy Daisy. 1 mana, 2/1, start a game, send a friend request to your opponent. Card in which you have the opportunity to talk to your opponent right away, at the cost of including 1 mana, 2/1 in your deck. Honestly, I could see that card being printed, surprisingly. I was initially going to say absolutely not, and it's obviously a troll card, but not even a troll card. It's obviously like just a funsy card, but it's okay for a game in Hearthstone to have a funsy effect, isn't it? You have to severely weaken your deck, but this has kind of like the general idea of sometimes it's okay to print bad cards if some small subsection of the community would use it. Now, it's worth mentioning that I don't think this should ever be in a pack. Maybe it's like a promotional card type thing, because boy would you feel super bitter if you were to open this and like you weren't the type of player this were aimed for. I was initially gonna rate it 1 star as Blizzard would never print something like this, but I'm gonna give it a provisional 5-star rating. If, specifically, it's a promotional card, and it also has a cool animation, and then like it would give your opponent a big hug or something, I think that could be a fun card. Rebellious Flame. After you play a minion, this becomes a spell, 2 mana, 3/2 elemental, and then Rebellious Flame, the spell version, 2 mana, deal 3 damage. After you play a spell, this becomes a minion. So I'm actually going to say, of the 2 weeks, this is just flat out my favorite card. I think it's a really cool, flexible thing, and this is probably the closest card I've ever seen to be printable. So you either have a 2 mana, 3/2 elemental, which isn't great. You have a 2 mana, deal 3 damage, which also isn't great compared to Frostbolt, but it's worth mentioning that there's a little bit of danger in giving Mage too many good burn spells, because there's some critical mass at which it'll be insane. But it's like just spooky enough to be seriously considered as a constructed worthy card. It's really good in Arena, and it's really creative. So given that this is one of the best cards I've ever seen, I'm just gonna give that a 6-star rating, just to separate it out from all those other 5 stars. Probably the one thing I'll add is, just because it's a bit unclear, I would probably add the 3 words of when in hand, comma. Alright, next up we have Terrible Ooze. 4 mana, 4/4 taunt stealth. This card is terrible. As Masick explained in his post, what you would do is you would click the card and then like shake it around, and then it would tear into 2 different cards. 2 mana taunt, 2/2. 2 mana stealth, 2/2. And it's like too crazy even for Hearthstone. So it'll never happen. Not to mention, a card of taunt and stealth will probably never mention in Hearthstone just because it's too confusing, and I do mean that. It is so confusing that the first case that a taunt stealth minion, like a stealth minion gets taunt in Hearthstone, the innkeeper will come up and say like, you can attack even though this minion has stealth and taunt. I'm gonna give this a 2-star rating? I was tempted to give it a 1-star just because there's absolutely no way it would ever see print, but like the asterisk is, if this were to be in a special Hearthstone promotional set of crazy cards, like this would be a great card. Oh yeah, you could see this in a Brawl, right? That would be a fun Brawl card. Confused Double Agent for Rogue. 3 mana, 4/4. Battle Cry. Destroy a friendly minion. Combo. Don't. So I'm a fan of the very brief word that comes after combo. Don't. That actually completely gets the point across. There's currently nothing in Rogue that you really want to destroy, so you'd probably be looking to combo it, but it's like so much work just to get a 3 mana 4/4, because if you play any card before Edwin Van Cleef, then that's already a 3 mana 4/4. There's not enough good eggs, and also it doesn't work with, interestingly enough, Cube. So Cube Rogue will never be a thing, because if you play Cube and then you play Confused Double Agent, you don't destroy a friendly minion. So I like the card quite a bit, and I think it would be a good card to print and be like on the weaker side. So I'm gonna give this a 4-star. Next up, we've got Humorous Bowmen, made by Masick. 1 mana, 2/1, Battlecry, choose a minion, Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to it. You compare it to Elven Archer, which is 1 mana, 1/1, immediately deal 1 damage to something. This one can't hit face, and has a delayed effect. And when you're delaying damage, I think that's a big drawback compared to Elven Archer. And it has the same kind of effect as Voodoo Doll, except on a much smaller scale. And I think that's a very cool effect. So I think it's a really well balanced 1 mana 2/1. I'm gonna give this 5 stars. At its best, it does do 4 damage to a minion, but at its worst, it's just a 1 mana 2/1. Invoke the Shadow. Secret, play 5 stealth minions, reward the Shadow. The Shadow is a 5 mana 5/5 permanently stealth. When I was first throwing this idea around, there was like a mix of ridiculously overpowered and ridiculously underpowered. The reward does look terrible, right? At first, it's just a Stranglethorn Tiger. But the permanently stealth is a big deal. It means that you inevitably will beat your opponent, and they can do almost nothing to interact with the Shadow. You know, stuff that unconditionally AoEs down the board. Or Deadly Shot, gets around stealth, etc. Theoretically, lots of answers, but in reality, not very many. Like, there are many decks out there which just cannot deal with this. My beef with this, I guess, is it doesn't really matter if it's overpowered or underpowered. This is kind of just one of those cases where the card would be so unfun to play against that if you made this anywhere close to balanced, people would complain all the time about just getting beat up by this uninteractable Shadow. And then if it's underpowered, then like you would just never see play. I think the design is just bad on something like this. The flavor is good, but sometimes flavor doesn't make a card. So I'm gonna say 1 star. Totem Mastery. Quest summon all 4 basic totems. Reward. And I'm gonna state the text that was the intent. Reward, your totems have +1/+1 permanently. And recast this. So it's interesting, it's kind of got a Jade feel to it, where inevitably, eventually your totems will be huge and will be able to win, but the climb to get there is quite a journey. And there's also the idea of, wait a second, if you have all totems on the board already, then couldn't you just cast Bloodlust and win the game? And that's probably right. So clearly the intent of this card is to be put into a serious control deck, which is looking for a really, really late game. I wonder if +2/+2 would be overpowered. How does that +2/+2 and just not recasted sound? Because the recasted thing is, it's a cool creative concept, and it'd be cool to see that on something. Anyways, I think as is, it's a really interesting idea. It's quite a bit underpowered, but you could probably tweak it around to make it a competitive idea. Anyways, I think it's like a 4 stars. And finally, Khinza, Lord of the Fire, a mage legendary. 6 mana, 3/8. Your spells deal any excess damage to the enemy hero. Like every single spell is explosive runes, and we know how good that is. So the immediate obvious things is Meteor does a ridiculous amount of damage to the face. Flame Strike deals a lot of damage to the face, but if you thought that did a lot, Dragon's Breath deals a ridiculous amount, because if you Dragon's Breath Flame Strike, then Khinza actually survives with its ridiculous amount of health. And then 7 damage to every other minion on the board. I'm sure that's gonna cause the opponent's hero to explode. So what you could do is you could seriously nerf the health on this one. So I don't know, like a 3/3 maybe? It still would have the risk of breaking if you were to discover something like Meteor with it. I mean, it's clearly ridiculously overpowered right now. Most of it is because of the health. There's some question about, can you change it so that the spells are maybe just single target spells, but maybe that's too hard to code? That'll give Khinza Lord of the Fire 2 stars. Probably need some serious change. I don't even know if it's fun to play against a deck like this though. Bam! Khinza, Meteor, oh you're dead. Just such an effect on a minion. A repeatable effect is probably too much. So that's this week's cards. Let me know what you think about the star system and whether or not I should change it. Again, the stuff that I was debating about, at least, was just don't even do a star system and just discuss it. But it ended up being that, like, people like seeing stars, I think. The one that I went with is a 1-star, just 1 straight star system, and then finally, I could do a star system for design and a star system for balance. Or maybe you have your own idea, so let me know in the comments.